On September 12, 2025, astronomers discovered something that shattered all their notions of the universe's behavior. A massive object burst from the darkness of deep space, its tail stretching across the sky 5 times wider than the full moon, visible even to amateur astronomers with backyard telescopes. For several hours, it was confirmed. This was no ordinary comet. It was something much greater, much brighter, and much stranger than anything we had ever recorded. Officially registered as C2025R2, it was now simply called the SWAN. But the timing of this object's appearance astonished scientists and caused confusion, as another notorious object, the three-eyed Atlas, was also moving toward the sun from the exact opposite side of the sky. Both objects were to reach their closest distance to the sun within the same 10-day window, both hidden by sunlight at the critical moment, and both exhibited anomalies that defy the laws of nature. The probability of such a cosmic coincidence happening by chance is so low that some scientists stopped calling it coincidence and began whispering the word mission. If one interstellar body was strange enough, the arrival of a second, 100 times larger, targeting the same solar corridor suggests we might be witnessing not random astronomical events, but some operation. With the arrival of the data, the first thing that caught the researchers' attention about the SWAN was not only its size, but also its behavior. Unlike typical comets that scatter light in predictable patterns, the reflective properties of the SWAN revealed metallic signatures, hints of nickel, and cobalt, the same materials we, humans, use to create strong alloys and protect against corrosion. Some researchers began to call it a fortress, as while most comets disintegrate under solar heat, this object seemed protected, like armored, maintaining a brightness unexplained by ordinary ice and dust. And his tail, now record-breaking in length, did not behave like chaotic steam, but pulsed with subtle rhythmic changes, as if controlled by micro-pistons directing its movement. Imagine a skyscraper-sized tank drifting in space, surrounded by a shimmering halo that could be both gas and an electromagnetic shield, reflecting the fury of solar winds. This is the image scientists are currently grappling with. But even more alarming than its scale is the time of its appearance, because while the SWAN looms like a fortress, its smaller counterpart, the three-eyed Atlas, behaves like a drone, fast and unpredictable, with unusual bursts of acceleration and changes in tail color that no natural process can fully explain. Together, they do not appear as random guests. They look like parts of the same puzzle, two components of a system striving towards the sun simultaneously, hidden from us in those very days when their true purpose could have been revealed. When astronomers plot the arrival vectors of the SWAN and Atlas on the star map, something amazing occurs. SWAN came from Aquarius, Atlas from Sagittarius, and these two objects have origins separated by more than a quarter of the entire celestial sphere. However, despite their radically different approaches, both enter the inner solar system at nearly the same distance from the sun, reaching perihelion just 3 days apart. Statistically, such synchronization is impossible. Random comets are scattered across time for decades, sometimes even centuries, but never like this. And then, an eclipse begins. From October 8th to 18th, sunlight blinds our telescopes, creating a window where neither SWAN nor Atlas can be directly observed. The result, their closest approach to the sun and to each other occurs at the very moment when Earth's instruments cannot see them. For many, this seems less like a coincidence and more like coordination, as if their paths were intentionally designed to meet under the cover of sunny intervention. Think about this. Two anomalous objects arrive together, synchronizing their meeting in one place and at one time, when we cannot observe. In the dynamics of orbits, astronomers call this corridor, a narrow window of space and time where two objects align in a way that defies randomness. And this corridor, whether by chance or design, forced the scientific community to confront a possibility it had long avoided. What if they are not just passing by, but gathering for a purpose? Although orbital mechanics raises questions, the data on energy causes concern. Atlas has already shocked researchers with bursts of acceleration that resemble maneuvers using engines. Each impulse requires energy equivalent to 10 nuclear power plants. But SWAN looks even more impressive, as its supposed energy levels exceed the power of the entire Earth's energy grid by 10,000 gigawatts. No natural comet core can produce such powerful energy. Its reflective metals, constant halo, and rhythmic pulses hint not at gas emissions, but at control, as if this machine uses plasma bursts for navigation. The idea of creating controlled thrust, once dismissed as science fiction, is now quietly discussed among astronomers who can no longer ignore these figures. And then there is the regularity of the impulses, clear enough to resemble a signal, patterned enough to hint at communication, and so consistent that some call SWAN not a fortress, but a lighthouse. If Atlas is a drone maneuvering and correcting its course, then SWAN can be a mothership, a colossal structure designed to survive in space for millennia, returning not by chance, but in a cycle. With an orbital period of over 22,000 years, SWAN could have passed here long before recorded history, perhaps even during the last ice age, leaving traces that our ancestors might remember as myths, carvings, or warnings. And now he has returned, aligning once again with another anomaly, as if reminding us that we are not the only intelligence shaping the sky. At the moment when global curiosity peaked, silence reigned. NASA, the European Space Agency, and other organizations quietly limited data publication, suspending high-precision images and radar tracking on the very days when two objects were supposed to approach the sun. Officially, this was explained as a downtime due to solar conjunction, a standard precautionary measure. However, behind the scenes, leaks revealed that the instructions were clear: avoid public statements, deny requests for raw data, and redirect proposals for alternative observations. This information blackout was not natural. It was imposed. Nevertheless, the silence of the institutions only amplified the voices of independent astronomers who united on forums and private networks to continue watching the sky. Groups like the Iberotraca Collective in Spain and Bill Gray's distributed network of telescopes began sharing data, aiming to capture even fragments of information that governments refused to publish. This movement from below fueled speculation that something unusual was happening behind the scenes, something that the agencies did not want to show the public. If the SWAN and Atlas objects are approaching each other for a purpose, the real question is not only what they are, but why they are here right now. And if their meeting was planned, humanity has already found itself in the midst of a mission we were not meant to witness. When telescopes tracked three objects, something unusual became noticeable. Its tail glowed, not just brightly, but seemed to change as if intentionally. Over the course of several weeks, three sharp accelerations were recorded, each sudden and unexpected, almost like clockwork, coinciding with a strange change in the color of the tail. At one moment, the light began to turn red, then shifted to a neutral state, and then returned again, as if an invisible mechanism regulated its movement. The natural evaporation of comets occurs gradually under the influence of solar heat, but what Atlas demonstrated was sharp, rhythmic, and controlled. Energy readings indicated that the power required for each thrust was equivalent to 10 nuclear power plants operating at full capacity. For a chunk of ice and dust, this should have been impossible. For a machine, it made perfect sense. Meanwhile, the enormous SWAN structure reflected this behavior on an even larger scale. Its giant tail was not chaotic, but pulsed with microbursts that carefully adjusted its movement, as if with high precision. Both objects, one small and maneuverable, the other huge and unstoppable, seemed to be navigating the solar system not as drifters, but as participants in a plan. The most alarming part was that their movements were not random. They appeared synchronized. Orbital dynamics is what astronomers trust to reveal the truth. But here, the truth is unsettling. SWAN and Atlas, although arriving from completely different directions in the galaxy, aligned in such a way that they occupied the same narrow corridor of space and time. The perihelion points of these objects, the closest moments of their approach to the sun, turned out to be only 50 million kilometers apart, a distance less than that between Earth and Mars. Their time intervals coincided within 3 days, and all this happened at the exact moment of the solar eclipse, when ground telescopes were blinded by bright light. For comet observers, accustomed to centuries of data, this is unprecedented. Usually, interstellar guests appear sporadically, sometimes with decades in between, their orbits scattered across time and space. But here we are dealing with two anomalies crossing the same corridor in strict synchronization, as if someone were guiding them by a schedule, by clocks operating at a level beyond human understanding. It seems that the sun is not just a gravitational center, but a meeting point, a hub for missions we are just beginning to comprehend. When randomness loses meaning, intention comes to the forefront as the only explanation. And now even the most cautious voices in astronomy admit, this looks like the result of engineering work. When scientists compared the energy outputs of two objects, disbelief turned into horror. Atlas, with its sudden jolts, emitted bursts of energy equivalent to 10 gigawatts, enough to power major cities. But SWAN, with its steady glow, implied an energy output of 10,000 gigawatts, exceeding all the energy generated by Earth. Such a scale of energy cannot be explained by natural processes. Comets sublimate. Asteroids reflect sunlight, but nothing can sustain such a stable, colossal power without destruction. Theories began to emerge. Could it be that SWAN collects solar energy, using the sun as a colossal charging station? Perhaps its huge metallic body is designed to capture radiation and convert it into thrust? Some eccentric researchers even claimed that it was not a comet at all, but a fortress-like structure, and its vast glowing tail was a byproduct of plasma shielding. The most frightening possibility? That its energy was needed not for travel, but for communication. A lighthouse emitting signals not to Earth, but far beyond its boundaries. Pulsating radiations transmit data through the void. If this is true, then SWAN is not just on its way, it is reporting something. And we are not its target audience. As both objects approached perihelion, the institutions we relied on for truth began to fall silent. NASA, ESA, and ISRO reduced updates, restricted access to real-time data, and denied requests for raw observations from the Webb telescope. Information that was once public suddenly became confidential. When asked, officials referred to internal checks and connection times, but behind closed doors, astronomers whispered about explicit orders to remain silent. Requests for FO1A returned heavily edited documents, and leaks from observatory staff suggested that researchers had been reassigned, teams disbanded, and telescope operations restricted. It was not the usual silence of cautious science, but a deliberate hush. At the same time, independent astronomers began to fill the created void, uniting telescope networks in backyards, repurposed satellites, and encrypted data channels to track what governments refused to disclose. The more silence from the authorities, the louder the whispers became. Something unusual was happening, something so paradigm-shifting that silence turned into a tool of control. For when discoveries threaten not only science, but also power, the truth is never denied. It is concealed. In this case, silence can be the most terrible evidence. As SWAN and Atlas approached their closest encounter, scientists began revisiting ancient records not out of despair, but because SWAN's orbital period hinted at something astonishing. Every 22,554 years, this object returns, meaning its last appearance coincided almost perfectly with the end of the last ice age. Archaeological sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey suddenly gained new significance, as among the ancient stone images, one can find depictions of celestial events, spirals, and symbols that some researchers believe represent long-period comets shining in the prehistoric sky. Imagine the earliest civilizations of humanity gazing at a shining fortress the size of a small world, dominating the skies, leaving such impressions that they became myths carved in stone for generations. Perhaps SWAN had already been here, seen by ancient eyes, and its arrival documented as warnings, prophecies, or religious iconography. If this cycle has been repeating since ancient times, when human memory did not yet exist, then perhaps what we observe now is not just astronomy, but the return of something that our ancestors feared so much that they immortalized it in their myths. Behind polished press releases and cautious scientific statements, quiet operations unfolded in the shadows. Sources whispered of a secret probe launched from a covert orbital platform, a mission created to investigate the true nature of SWAN. The probe was equipped with modern particle detectors designed to penetrate the dazzling tail and capture high-quality structural data. It never reached its target. Just over 1 million kilometers from the object, its signal suddenly cut off. For a moment, the analysts thought it was a system failure. But then came the final image, a reflection, a fractal echo of the probe itself, as if SWAN was scanning it, reproducing it in perfect reflection. Moments later, the connection was lost again. Engineers analyzing the data called it an energy wall, a mesh field resembling a Faraday cage, designed not only for protection but also for repelling intrusions. If this is true, then the SWAN does not just pass by. It is protected, actively monitoring and countering everything that comes too close. The implications of this fact are frightening. It is not only enormous, but also aware of its existence. Spectroscopic data from the network added another layer of mystery. Instead of the usual mix of ice, dust, and silicates expected from comets, the spectrum of the SWAN object revealed traces of complex organic molecules, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, so refined and structured that some scientists began to claim they looked artificially created. These molecules are the building blocks of life, precursors to amino acids, the very seeds from which biology can arise. Unlike the chaotic mixtures found in primitive comets, the organic substances of SWAN were pure, ordered, almost too perfect. Some began to theorize that SWAN might not just be a machine, but a vessel, a starship intended for transporting and possibly spreading life across star systems. If Atlas was a drone, agile and active, and SWAN was a fortress, massive and protected, together they could represent different stages of an ancient mission: observation, defense, and possibly colonization. If so, Earth's position in this story may not be coincidental. We may be the next step in a plan that precedes us by tens of thousands of years. With the deepening of the blackout period, independent observers noted a detail that few dared to speak aloud. The trajectories of Atlas and SWAN were not just coincidentally aligned. They seemed to align in one direction towards the same area of space, a corridor that brought them close to the sun. For natural objects, such precision would be absurd. But here, the orbital dance appeared intentional, as if two ships had arrived at port to meet. Some theorists have suggested that this could be a refueling event. The sun acts as an energy hub where both objects recharge.